Free Japan Channel number 62. Today, February 27th, Thursday, 2025. The time is 5 a.m., so before the dawn. Yokohama is still dark. Night is still on. Good morning, dear friends. How are you? This morning, I will talk about Pacific War. Today's theme is Pacific War. Why Japan defeated. This is the topic of this morning. Pacific War began in November 8th in Japanese time, in November 8th, 1941, and it ended August 15th in 1945. Therefore, the Pacific War continued 3 years and 8 months. This time was literally predicament for Japanese people. Of course, the first 6 months, the first half year was the time when Japanese Navy and Army proceeded and expanded the territory, Japanese territory in Southeastern Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Burma. These areas were so-called emancipated by Japanese Navy and Japanese Army. The Western colonists, the white colonists, were expelled from these areas thanks to Japanese invasion. Therefore, in this sense, we can say that Japanese Army made the independence of these areas possible. And we can say that. However, the most important thing was not the emancipation or liberation of the Asian colony, but the war against the United States. This was the most important thing for Japanese people in the Pacific War, needless to say. I said, first 6 months were very good, very smooth for Japanese Army and Navy. However, Midway, the Battle of Midway was the turning point of the Pacific War. In this battle, Japanese Navy lost 4 main carriers and 300 airplanes and many sailors. Military sailors. And after that, after Midway, the Battle of Solomon Sea, namely Guadalcanal Island, there Japan lost so many planes, more than 1,000 planes in Solomon battle. And of course, American Navy was damaged by the desperate attack of Japanese Navy, including Air Force, Japanese Air Force. However, Japan also lost so many skillful pilots and planes. Therefore, even if Japan still held some carriers, the planes and pilots were lost. Therefore, Japan could not operate the military strategy in the Pacific area. So this was the situation of 1942 and 1943. Admiral Yamamoto, he was the main leader of Pearl Harbor attack, as well as the Battle of Midway and other operations. Yamamoto reiterated before the war that Japanese Navy could fight against the United States well enough, but only half year or 1 year. After that, Yamamoto said he couldn't be confident of the capability of Japanese Navy. Therefore, Yamamoto thought before the war that Japanese Navy should finish the war against the United States as soon as possible, favorably half year, at most 1 year. Further, he couldn't be sure. Pearl Harbor attack was December 1941, and the withdrawal from Guadalcanal Island was February 1943. Therefore, when the Battle of Guadalcanal was lost from Japanese perspective, then Yamamoto clearly realized that this Pacific War couldn't be won from Japanese point of view. Therefore, Admiral Yamamoto was crushed 1943. It was April in New Guinea. I always think that this attack from American combat planes to Yamamoto plane was a kind of suicide of Admiral Yamamoto, because he already knew that the war couldn't be won by Japanese Army and Navy, and the person who is responsible for the inception of the war will be accused after the war. And one of these soldiers or admirals, generals, was Yamamoto himself. He knew it very well, therefore he half knew that Japanese code, Japanese naval code was decoded by the United States. However, he purposefully went to New Guinea, a very dangerous place, and he was shot by American combat plane. The United States already decoded the naval code of Japan, and they ambushed in the air, and Yamamoto plane and other 60 was ambushed in New Guinea, and Yamamoto died. Today's theme: why Japan defeated. The reason is that Japan couldn't continue the war more than 1 year. However, Japan couldn't end the war within 1 year. So decisive victories should be consecutive for Japanese Army and Navy. But Japan couldn't achieve such victories. Of course, Pearl Harbor was victorious, and other Malay operation was also successful. But it only continued 6 months. After Midway, Japan experienced a series of defeats in the Pacific War. Japanese national power, so economic power, was said at the time 1/10 or 1/15 of that of the United States. Therefore, the battle against the United States, the fight against the United States was, from the first time, totally impossible for Japan. However, the blunders of politicians and high-ranking soldiers, generals and admirals led to the beginning of the Pacific War. It was a very miserable and unfortunate aspect of Japanese modern history. Japan was defeated because it was the only way for Japan to go when it began the Pacific War at Pearl Harbor. So the best thing, or the only thing that Japan could do in 1941 was literally to endure the plight of Japan at that time, and always put up with the international unfairness that Japan at the time received, mainly from the United States. So Japan should stand. Stand means Japan should endure the plight imposed by the United States and the United Kingdom at that time. So remain silent, remain still. Then in Europe, German army began to lose the battle against the Soviet Union. Then in 1942 or 1943, Japanese leaders would have been aware that Germany couldn't win the war in Europe. Then it cannot be, so Germany cannot be reliable ally for Japan. Then Japan can't wage a war against the United States. This judgment could be reached in 1942 or in 1943. Therefore, Japanese leaders should wait and see, should have waited and seen the international affair in 1941. They should have remained still and silent, but they couldn't. In reality, they couldn't. They went to Pearl Harbor. It was the beginning of the Pacific War. And on that very first day, Japanese defeat was decided. Thank you.